Wow, that's great. You know you're having a great day when your introduction is done by the legendary Tom Alberg. So thank you so much, Tom, for all that. So, Satya, how are you?
Very, very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, what an honor to share the stage with you today. We just met, so for the benefit of us, we literally just met outside, so we're going to have a lot of fun getting to know each other.
I know, he was telling me that you worked at Microsoft when we hired non-PhDs into research.
That's right, I snuck in. Yeah. I like to say I snuck into Microsoft in 92.
It's changed.
That's right. Yes, I'm sure I hear that all the time. I hear that from my old college, that you'll never get in if you're a student now. So really excited for you to be here. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on probably 4 or 5 main topics that we'll touch on today. So these topics are going to range from leadership and cultural transformation at a company. We're going to talk about your vision for the future and technology, how technology is going to impact us as a society. And there could be like a Gene Roddenberry perspective or an Aldous Huxley perspective on that. We're going to talk about issues of privacy and some things that is going on right now with Microsoft, and other fun things. So I'll try to give you some sort of maybe a signpost and do it that way. But first, I have to start off with a kind of a fun question. If you are like most highly successful people, highly successful CEOs, and you're also a parent and you have children, the irony is that your kids don't give a hoot about what you do, right? And now I just want to know, is that the case with you? And what do your kids think that you do all day when you go to work at Microsoft?
I think that they believe I actually don't work. Because in fact, this weekend, I was trying to actually get some work done. And my daughter comes to me and says, how come on weekends is the only time you work? And I thought about that and I said, wow, that's something, I've got to change that perception somehow.
That's great.
You actually do need to work hard. But I think that's the reality. I don't think that they really think I do anything.
That's right. I hear that's common. So what is the one thing that you want your kids to know about you that they don't currently know about you?
That's fascinating. I would say the thing that I hope, like for me, when I think back even at what I remember the most out of my parents, although I didn't know this growing up, is that they cared for other people. To me, if there is one quality of mine that I want to improve on, and the one quality that I hope my own children can appreciate in me and then thereby have it in them, is that deeper sense of empathy. It's not a destination, it's a journey. If that is something that I myself can demonstrate it and they get inspired by it, that'd be fantastic.
That's great. I appreciate that. So we did mention that this is both kind of heartening but also incredibly humbling when you're sharing a stage with someone that we both started at Microsoft at the same time, 92, am I correct?
That's right.
That's right. We actually have a lot of friends in common, folks that we know that we sort of grew up with, so to speak, and they all speak, to a person, they speak incredibly highly of you and how, even in some cases, that they knew that you were going to do great things. I'm
trying to see where you're going to go now.
Yeah. So where I'm going at is that if I could sort of be very declarative about this, and most people, if you, for the folks in the audience who didn't, some of you might have worked at Microsoft and maybe later, and many of you did not. But back in '92, I could distinctly recall that as a young person working there, that we really truly felt, man, this was the best company in the world. And it was the only company like that in the world. It didn't feel like that there were a lot of others. And so it was a lot of fun. It was intellectually rigorous. You worked really, really hard. And you got a lot of things done. You were inventing new things and new technologies. And that lasted for quite a while. And then at some point, sort of that energy shifted a little, right? It changed. And recently I shared a stage with a Microsoft board member, John Stanton, at a GeekWire event, and I sort of said casually, it used to be that a few years ago I would see a lot of Microsoft employees at these startup events, right? But now I don't see any, right? And so, and he remarked that that's 100% because of a cultural transformation and your leadership at that company. And he gave you a lot of credit for that. So I'm fascinated with this stuff. How can you talk a little bit about the recent cultural change at the company? And if hypothetically, if a guy like me came back, if you would have me, if a guy like me came back tomorrow, what might feel different?
That's a great question. I mean, the thing that impressed me the most in '92 when I joined the company was that sense of identity and sense of purpose was implicitly very deeply understood. We knew we had caught something. We had caught, for example, I joined what eventually became our server journey. And that's kind of what even got me from Sun to come to Microsoft. And everyone had that. Like, everyone knew that we had caught a technology trend and that we were going to be on the right side of history, and then we rode it and very well. What I've come to realize, though, is it's one thing for companies to catch inflection points and ride them. And that's how you build successful big companies, whether it's be Microsoft, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, what have you. But what is a real test is when that wave or two, it eventually has to come to an end. They all do. It may take someone 5 years, someone 10 years, someone 50. But eventually the wave you caught that made you successful, made you big, eventually will come to an end. The question is, what's the next act? And that is only going to be possible if you have that two things. One, a very strong sense of identity. Why does the world need you? What is that sense of purpose? In fact, for example, when I joined the company, we used to talk about our mission as a PC on every home and every desk. In retrospect, that was a goal, not a mission. Our true identity was more about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more through digital technology. So that's why I've gone back to what I think is that core sense of identity as our mission. And now, of course, we want to express it with a different technology paradigm. So more than anything else, I would say having that sense of purpose and identity constantly being renewed with technology changes is what, in fact, propagates longevity in our business. And the other side is culture, which you mentioned. Even there, it's not a static thing. It's not something that you say, let's maintain our cultural values. You have to have values, but culture itself has to be something that you're constantly pushing to renew. And so those are the two places where at least I have focused a lot of my energy on being very, very clear on what's the mission, what's the culture of this company. And then the fact that one technology waves come down doesn't mean we don't get to invent. So I'm excited about all the new things that we're doing.
Yeah, right, which we'll get to. So that's cool. So I was at a CEO dinner 2 weeks ago, and it was a group of about 25 or 30 people, and it was hosted. Actually, Zillow's got a big table here. It was Spencer Raskoff was the host, and it was a great smattering of big companies, small companies, companies that are public, some that are more later stage startups, all trying to make a go of it. And everyone was asked to get up and talk about their number one business challenge. Running these businesses. And I was very, very surprised by the fact that half of the CEOs in the room of varying sizes of companies said a challenge related to the culture and how hard it was to actually transform a culture or to re-energize a culture. And half the people said that. And so I want to know, what advice would you, if you had been at this dinner, what advice would you share with other leaders of other organizations who are thinking about transforming their company culture? How do you re-engage the troops and ignite transformation?
That's a great question, because one of the things that I've always said, or at least I've come to understand, is even what's the job of the CEO?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things the CEO needs to get right in terms of picking passing judgment on where to go, passing judgment on strategy. Those are all important calls. But perhaps more than anything else, it's curation of culture. That's, in fact, I think, the job of the CEO, which is how do you curate a culture that then, in turn, gets the best out of your institution or your organization. And in our case, so that's the advice I would give to your specific question. In our case, a lot of what I have tried to do is even come up with a culture meme that speaks to the individual people. Because, if it's not about coming down from the top and saying, hey, here are the cultural attributes. How do you appeal to every person inside of the organization? And so then, from there, I went to, we need a learning organization. And the thing that we picked to create a learning organization is what we describe as growth mindset. And I picked this up out of child psychology. Carol Dweck has written a book called Mindset, and she's done some great work. And the idea is very intuitive and simple. If you take two people, one person with more innate capability and the other person with a little less innate capability, but one person is a know-it-all and the other is a learn-it-all. The learn-it-all will always trump the know-it-all. So the idea here was to be able to say, okay, we want to be the organization that is the learn-it-all. And this is about each one of us exercising this growth mindset. And to me, in fact, it's funny because sometimes people come to me and say, hey, I found these 5 people at Microsoft who don't have a growth mindset. And I say, God, that's exactly what you shouldn't be doing, which is we should not go looking around for people who don't have growth mindset. The goal should be for us to individually reflect on all the times that we have a fixed mindset. And so, long story short, it's the culture and the constant curation of the culture, but it has to speak to individually each one of us, as opposed to a set of attributes on a poster.
Yeah, I would imagine that in sort of defining that, whether it's as part of your process of curation, I like the way that you put that, and coming up with this meme, so to speak, that works for everybody. That you began your own journey of listening and learning. Is that correct? That this was sort of, there's a process of sort of listening, like bottoms up and then back down. Is that a fair way to describe it?
I think leadership in many cases is got 2 sets of things. One is you have to be able to synthesize what is today the external view that is complex, and yet also organically create the internal movement. So in some sense, the job of a CEO or a leader is to be able to take something that is complex and synthesize. And that can only happen if you not only are creating frameworks, but also listening.
Yeah, that's great. Gosh, I could talk to you a long time just about that stuff. It's fascinating stuff. Let's talk about Microsoft and sort of the competitive landscape and other companies that are out there. I like to tell this joke that I remember when I was at Microsoft that I loved my experience there, but the one sort of regret that I had was, first one is not having gotten to know you while we were both there. The second one is I remember sometimes getting in my review, like, things are going great, but Jonathan, sometimes you're too nice. You're just too nice of a guy. And I remember then an interesting contrast that when I went to Google that first time, and I worked for Marissa Mayer, and sometimes in my review or just in conversations, I might get, Jonathan, sometimes you need to back it off a little bit. Like you're a little too hardcore. So it's fascinating to me the differences in culture, just even at whatever level in the organization, how you communicate, how you interact. Do you feel like that there's how is Microsoft's culture, whether it's internal interaction or with partners and customers, unique to Microsoft? What gives it an advantage, if there's such a thing?
I think the identity of our company. So let's go back and think about the mission we have. And the uniqueness of it. For example, I would say all of our competitive advantage, if ever, comes from us living our identity to its fullest potential with changing technology paradigms. We are clearly one of the only organizations that thinks about both people and organizations or institutions. To me, institutions matter. I think sometimes we overstate just people. Of course, people are the most important thing. But the most lasting impact, in fact, I was thinking about even the startups that were just up before me. They're all not just great entrepreneurs, but they're building companies. And to me, we are the digital platform company that thinks about people who are in pursuit of building long-term organization. That gives us competitive advantage. That gives us more, before competitive advantage, that sense of purpose and identity. Second, we think globally. I mean, think about it. Like, I wouldn't be CEO of Microsoft if it was not for Microsoft's technology being a global force. And to me, that's the other piece that gives us competitive advantage. That's the reason why for Windows 10 launch, I wanted to, as much to remind ourselves, say, let me go to Kenya to launch it, not to New York. Because there isn't a single immigration line anywhere in the world that doesn't use something from Microsoft. And how do we make sure that they upgrade from XP is an important thing. But it is a sense of how do we really build a global company that is changing the world. The last part of our mission is probably the thing that shapes both our culture and our lasting impact, which is, look, we don't have some two-sided market. It's not like I get to sort of make money one place and then have fun in others. We have only one-sided market, which is whether it's a student writing a term paper, whether it's a small business driving their productivity up, or a large business going through a digital transformation. They only pay us if they get value. So that means we've got to celebrate their success through digital technology. And we are fully focused on that. So if you sort of look at our competitive mix of other platform vendors, it's not, I say this in simple terms, it's not about our product, it's about our customer's product. So those three attributes, which come from our mission, is what I believe will first express our best work. We want to pick. So in fact, I don't want to do things that don't fit with that North Star. And then doing it well is what gives us competitive advantage.
That's great. That's great. And you started to sort of touch on this. So we'll segue to the kind of a broad topic of how technology can be transformative for us and for society. And let's look out 10 years. It's now 2016. Can't believe it. But between now and, say, the next 10 years, 2026, what do you think, what industries do you think will be the most disrupted by technology? I know that you've been very public about, hopefully I get this right, cloud first, mobile first, cloud first, that meme, which is highly interesting. What's your perspective on that?
A couple of things. One is, I think, if you sort of take what's happening, let's first describe even the technology paradigm shift, and then we'll talk about, quote unquote, the disruption. Computing is becoming ubiquitous, and experiences are becoming intelligent. In fact, I describe it sometimes even as ambient intelligence, ubiquitous computing, mobile first, cloud first. To me, that essentially speaks to what's happening. Now, the thing that is the force behind all of this is increasing levels of digitization. Take what is mixed reality. What is mixed reality? It's the first time we are taking essentially an analog world, our field of view, and treating it like an infinite display. And we are able to put into the field of view digital objects. It's going to change everything. So computing is not something you go to. Computing is there in everything you see. Then let's take another massive change. What I describe as these conversational platforms. instead of being mediated by a bunch of menus and other form metaphors that we've created in the digital world, what if I could just talk to all the computing around me? You see this today in instant messaging, but what if instant messaging was not just about instant messaging, but it became the interface to all computing activity? That means computers understood human language and were able to really help you navigate all of computing just by being able to understand you, whether it's speech, whether it's text, or what have you. Then let's take the third thing that I think a lot about, which is if everything is digitally connected. And it's not just, it's all the people, all the places, all the things are digitally connected. So it's not a web of documents, but it's a web of everything. So if you take those three, then you say, okay, what's going to be disrupted? For sure, our industry, the tech industry, is going to be disrupted. But that's the least interesting part to me. The question is, okay, how is education going to change? How is healthcare going to change? How is energy going to change? How is retail going to change? How is manufacturing? I was in Hanover last weekend, and it's amazing to see. I mean, here I am at the biggest industrial conference in the world, and digital is everywhere. There are elevators that are now not elevators anymore. They're connected elevators where you have predictive maintenance. And the business model of the elevator company is no longer on the gross margin of the elevator, but it's on the gross margin of the service that they sell on the elevator. That's just one minor example of it. But I think it's the transformation. In fact, that's sort of so important for us in technology and for Microsoft. It's not about, okay, I've got, built one consumer internet service and got lots of MAU and so on. It is like, okay, who is going to take the digital technology platforms and make it available for every industry in every part of the world to become a digital company? That, in some sense, is at the core of what we are trying to get done.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you touched on some very powerful ideas here, and as I said at the outset, there's sort of a couple of schools of thought. You could be sort of very Gene Roddenberry about that very optimistic, and that technology is going to provide a lot of really wonderful solutions for us, like you said, impacting education, healthcare, across many segments of society. Or you can take a more Aldous Huxley, where sometimes there's a downside, and there's a little bit more perhaps cynicism and caution with that perspective. There's sort of this notion that with the advent of a lot of AI and artificial intelligence, that it might start to replace jobs, that it'll put people out of work. How should the role of people in some industries change and prepare for that, if that's necessary at all?
No, absolutely. I mean, in some sense, always there has been displacement, which has been very, very painful for society as we've gone from one technology revolution to the other. But this is perhaps one of those times where the displacement doesn't just lead to jobs in another sector. That, I think, is the reason why it is the right thing for us to all debate, talk about, and even and think about why is it different this time? Because just being technology utopian is probably not the right approach. We should actually be concerned. But the question is, what do you do? And I think the only thing that I can think of, and that I think that we should rally together as companies like Microsoft, but as a broader society, is education. Not just education in the sense of the boys and girls graduating from school or in school today, but also anyone who is going to get displaced. And when I was in the UK, one of the programs that I was sort of very impressed with is what Cameron has done with his apprenticeship program, which I know in Washington State as well we're working. I think that that's something that we should take a very deep look at, because it allows people to go from one industry to the other, pick up new skills, to the extent to which the jobs are getting created, which require a very different type of skill set. So I would say focusing on education is perhaps the action that we can take.
Yeah.
Then you get to a very different place, which is if a lot of economic surplus, which I do believe is going to get created still, and if economic surplus is getting created but jobs are not getting created, then that's another place where there needs to be new policies on how that economic surplus gets distributed so that people are able to, in fact, be taken care of.
Yeah.
And so these are real issues. I don't think I have a solution, but I am definitely someone who would want to participate in a vigorous debate, and more so for Microsoft to be a participant in contributing.
Right. Yeah, that's great. It's great that you brought that up because there are a lot of folks from the education segment here today. This is what I love about the Tech Alliance. It's such a broad cross section. So I do have two more questions as it relates specifically to the role of technology in education. I'll be blunt. Are schools in our region going about it in the right way? How should schools in Washington think about where technology can have even greater impact?
A couple of things. One is, I want to define even technology more broadly, because one of the things that we sometimes think about is computer science. I mean, computer science is very important, but it's computational thinking that is, I would say, more important. It's important for every field going forward. And so I don't think anyone, quite frankly, anywhere in the world has gotten it yet right. And so we can sort of debate who's gotten it more right. The thing, though, we have to do is start with great teachers. The one thing that I think about is, there was, in fact, a Microsoft researcher who wrote a great book where he went to India, spent a whole bunch of time looking at, okay, how can technology change? And then he came to realize that it's really great teachers, motivated and involved family, or rather involved family and motivated students. That's what it takes to change educational outcomes, and technology can help. So we can't overemphasize technology for technology's sake, but we've got to think about, okay, how does that virtuous cycle of parents and community, teachers, school administrations, and motivated students come together? That's probably the place where we'll have to do our best work. Then, in at least how I think about Microsoft's contribution, after all, we are a technology company, is how do we promote through something like TEALS? Because we have a huge gap right now. I can say computational thinking, but we don't have teachers yet who can then impart that computational thinking en masse. It's a 10-year journey. So how do we bridge between that and now? I think it's by taking people out of the industry to go back and volunteer. So that's where the TEALS program comes in. So programs of that sort is what I think the industry will need to do to supplement what I think is the fundamental reform of the education system.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So that's sort of a great answer to the beginning of the journey, as in terms of how we're educating the young people in this country and how they're then to graduate and do cool things. There's been a lot of stuff that you've talked about with regards to Microsoft's commitment to growing a more diverse pool of talent. Can you talk more about that and how that's going, and what are sort of the key drivers and key KPIs?
For us, the business case for diversity is just very, very straightforward. If you go back again to our mission and say we want to empower every person and every organization on the planet, we've got to represent that planet with its full richness and diversity in the company. There is no way we can do a good job of building the products that we aspire to. And I think about very broadly diversity. That means it's about gender, it is about ethnicity, it is about the LGBT community feeling like they can do their best work at Microsoft. It's the entire spectrum. It's also the older people at Microsoft feeling like that they are part of Microsoft and are still doing their best work, because one of the big issues, at least in the first world, would be people who are going to work much longer. So therefore, I do believe that having that broad swath or broad sort of perspective on diversity is important, and we have a good start. We have a long way to go. And what matters to me the most is each year, are we better in representation? Are we better in our inclusiveness culture? Are we, for example, one of the things that we rolled out to everybody was this unconscious bias training. And it's fascinating because, quite frankly, and the idea was, let's not treat this as one more thing that I've got to do and be defensive, but to go into this and feel vulnerable and recognize those things, which are the unconscious biases that each of us really have. And then make that come, and because of that empathy that you have built, awareness that you have built, the next meeting you're in, you're able to draw out the people who so to date have not participated so that they can participate. That's skills. You can't teach them. You've got to kind of really deeply understand it. And so those are the things that we're very, very focused on. And as I said, it's a journey, but we're making progress.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. It's very, very heartening to hear. It's obviously a focus of mine as well, and you're leading by example. We're going to segue to privacy. And as many of you know, it's something that's very, very top of mind. It's something that is very much in the news. It's a big discussion across a lot of big tech companies in our segment in particular. And now Microsoft is suing the U.S. government over the government's demands for customer data. And you and Microsoft feel that there should be more transparency to the customer there. Frankly, why is this such a big deal for Microsoft? So first of all, I never thought that we would live to see the day when Microsoft would sue the U.S. government, versus the other way around. But how would you describe that? That was the world that I lived under. How would you describe Microsoft's overall philosophy on privacy and how it should work with governments?
Look, I think the principles that are driving our stance on privacy and security are well established for us. So, for example, we really stand to care, for every user of our services having control over their data, being transparent about the data that's being collected and what it's being used for, keeping the data secure, and then being compliant with all the rules and regulations in the jurisdictions that we work in. That's our promise. Now, in that context, we will fight to defend that promise. So if we completely recognize the government's need to protect the security of its citizens. So it's not that, we absolutely think governments have a role, except that if there is overreach of that, which compromises some of the enduring principles of privacy, that is when we will fight and push back and sue the government. And that's what we are doing. We are hoping that there is a new framework of law that allows, in fact, our government in the United States to get that right balance between privacy and public safety. Because I think that is very important. In fact, I would say the onus is on the United States to get that right, because we are, after all, the beacon that is going to, everyone else will look to. If we get it right, every other democracy will say, well, that's a model. In fact, I think what I would advocate for, and I know what Brad and I have advocated in Washington and in other capitals, is that if the US and the UK and other countries and Germany and so on can come together, establish this new equilibrium, the world will be a better place for being able to balance the legitimate needs for public safety and the legitimate values of privacy.
That's great. That's great. I see that we have just about, unfortunately, 2 more minutes left. I know it's actually a great a testament to the fact that this is going so quickly, it seems like, because we're just learning so much. So So perhaps one last question I have is, what are you most excited about personally as you look to the future? What do you sort of want to turn us all on to paying attention to with all of these business leaders in the crowd here?
I think the thing that I get very, very excited about is the technology trends. In fact, it was fantastic to even see the 3 startups up here. And in fact, the 3 things that all compose that were represented in personalized medicine to the IoT scenarios or to AR, VR. So technology and what technology will do for us in our lives is super exciting. But more than anything else, I think the ability of using technology in a much more mainstream way than we have ever done, digital technology, to shape the outcomes of our lives. Whether it be a student in rural Kenya being able to access the best education or the best economic opportunity. It was one of the most mind-bending things that happened to me was I went to an internet cafe in a place called Nanyuki in Kenya. And I met this guy who was on a PC and doing something. And I asked him, what are you doing? He says, oh, I'm teaching physics. And I asked, like, wow, teaching physics? And this is rural Kenya.
Yeah.
And so he says, yeah, you know what? I'm a physics major, and that's what I do, actually. I wanted to come back after graduating to live in my ancestral place. But yet, since I know physics, I said, I'm going to teach it. So I said, oh, so you must be teaching local kids, but why are you in the computer? And he says, no, I'm teaching these European kids who are, need help in physics. And I said, wow. And I get money through M-Pesa. And that is when it struck me that this 4th industrial revolution of ours can truly create transformative economic opportunity and outcomes for everybody if brought about right, used right. And that, to me, is perhaps the most exciting thing for me.
That's great. That's great. That's very inspiring, and we're just it's very heartening to hear you talk about this stuff, and that we're all working in the technology sector, helping to usher some of these realities in. So that's I want to thank you on behalf of the Tech Alliance for being here. It's just been a pleasure talking with you, and I know speaking for me personally, I learned a lot just now in the last 40 minutes.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.